Welcome to Daily Drive for Wednesday, December 24th, 2025. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, we continue our annual series of conversations about the biggest stories of the past year, with a look at two of Japan's biggest automakers throughout 2025. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk all about Toyota. We kick things off today with a look at the long list of struggles that Nissan had throughout 2025. Joining me are Automotive News Atlanta Bureau Chief Urvaksh Karkaria, as well as Toyota and Subaru reporter Larry Vellequette. The Nissan crisis and failed Honda merger. Urvaksh, Nissan had its worst loss in 25 years. It launched a revival plan, and then merger talks with Honda collapsed. Help us understand what went wrong.
Yeah, so Nissan has had a pretty interesting year. Like I've said, they just can't seem to catch a break on many occasions. So, as you just noted, they had their worst annual loss in 25 years, so a quarter of a century. And late last year, they were in talks to sort of merge or do some sort of long-term deal with Honda, and that fell through. So now, Nissan's going it alone. They're undergoing a major austerity plan, both globally, but also in North America, which is their largest market. In North America alone, they're looking to cut about $2 billion. That's going to lead to, they've already cut hundreds of jobs through voluntary buyouts. They've closed two plants in Mexico so as to, maximize production in America, in North America. And they've taken several other measures to try to get the business back on track. Whether how long these moves, these measures will take to have a meaningful result is not known. But clearly, Nissan doesn't have time on its side. It doesn't have a cash flow issue right now. It does have still a considerable war chest. Plus, it can borrow just because it's so critical to the country, to Japan. But at some point, if they can't increase their market share, especially in America, it's going to become a challenge.
Well, Urvaksh, I've asked this question, I want to say, maybe earlier this year. But now, going into 2026, is Nissan salvageable at this point, or are we watching a slow motion collapse?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely salvageable. I hope it's salvageable for my own selfish interests. Because Nissan is such a news generator. But no, I think it's exaggerated to say that Nissan's going out of business. I still think that it has the heritage, it has the talent to fix its business here. I think one of the big challenges they faced in America is that for the past few years, they've had a pretty much a dated lineup. That's changing. They're coming out with new models. They missed the hybrid boom that Toyota absolutely leveraged to success. But they're finally bringing their a wave of hybrids, and they're also entering new segments that they were not in. So they're making the right moves. The question is, can they execute on it? Can they bring these products to market on time, and can they bring it competitively? And ultimately, that will decide whether these guys have a future or whether they get eventually acquired by some other company.
And why did the Honda merger fall apart? Now, was it ego or was it legitimate business concerns?
So, I think that from what I've understand from the folks I've spoken with inside Nissan, I think it was a combination of factors. I think fundamentally the two automakers, especially on their R&D and manufacturing departments or sides, they come to manufacturing and R&D from two different schools of thought, almost diametrically opposite. And so there was some kind of friction between the two departments or those areas of the business in terms of how do we work together. So there was definitely a cultural component to it. Just because they were both Japanese companies doesn't mean that they would get along. So that was one issue. The other issue was a question of urgency. Honda wanted Nissan to move much faster in fixing their business, making the hard decisions of cuts and closures. And, Nissan, it seems, was dragging its feet under the prior leadership, under Uchida. So that created some friction at the top end. And then there was some issues over technology, especially around hybrids. Honda wanted Nissan to adopt its hybrid powertrain strategy and technology, while Nissan had invested billions in its e-Power hybrid technology, which is a different kind, it's a series hybrid. So, one side didn't want to give up their baby. And so that led to, further friction. And then I guess the finally, I think the thing that broke the camel's back was this was originally sort of described as a merger of equals. At least Nissan wanted to show the world that they were not just getting acquired. But towards the end, Honda pretty much said that, listen, we're not interested in any merger or in any kind of long-term partnership. We need to just acquire you. And that was, a bridge too far for Nissan. And the board basically said, no, that's not happening.
Coming up, we'll talk more about Nissan's turbulent 2025, including its recent decision to overhaul its controversial dealer stair-step incentive program. That's next on Daily Drive. Now, Nissan just recently announced it's overhauling its controversial stair-step program after outcry from
Yeah.
dealers. How has that saga unfolded throughout the year, and can Nissan repair the damage?
Yeah, so stair steps have been an issue since Carlos gone. So Carlos wanted to basically essentially drive market share at all costs. And so he pushed volume on the dealers. They would basically be forced to take product, and then it was up to the dealers to figure out how to sell it, which led to all this kind of discounting. And periodically, every few years, Nissan management says, okay, we understand we made a mistake. We're going to move away from this volume. We're going to go towards towards more of a profit oriented push, especially after COVID, when they were able to charge higher rates. So again, when new leadership came last year under Christian Munier in the US, they pushed a new plan called Nissan One, where they basically said, okay, we're going to basically focus all the dealer compensation on growing market share because we desperately need to grow market share. And they promised that the targets would be attainable. They would be, enough to make the dealers profitable. And according to some dealers, none of that has happened. And so then the dealers basically didn't engage in the program. Only about half the dealers were achieving the 100% of their volume. So now they've said, okay, let's try this again. So now they've gone back to the drawing board. They're working on a new plan for 2026, where they would reduce the number of volume targets that dealers are eligible to hit. They're going to remove the top tier, which led to significantly higher objectives. Their argument is, okay, now the goals will be a little more attainable, so the dealers will engage. Of course, that's a big to be determined at this point.
Larry, what are your thoughts on Nissan in the year 2025 of all what went on?
So you can't help but sit here watching Nissan from the outside, especially if you've done this for as long as I have, and think, oh my gosh, this is Detroit in 2008 and 2009, right? The Honda, semi merger pushed together is like Ford and GM, right? Here are two companies that on paper, okay, you could combine, but they hate one another. Their cultures are completely different. But let's, because we have to push, we don't want to lose one from Team Japan, right? So we got to push them together. And that culturally just doesn't work. The stair steps, that's Stellantis, Stellantis, FCA, before that, Daimler, Chrysler, and Chrysler, completely the same, right? They went through all this. They did this. And what Nissan has been doing is just like in a sped up time frame, reliving that horrible period in Detroit before, it kind of got its crap together for about a minute and a half and was able to turn things around. But until you have that crisis that Nissan has right now, and until you learn that, okay, your dealers are actually, here to work with you, until you learn that lesson, they're going to be in rough shape.
But Larry, it feels like Nissan has been in crisis for a while now. Unlike you, I'm relatively new to the automotive industry in the grander arc of things. But were these struggles the same with Detroit for as long as Nissan seems to be?
Yeah, well, I think the cause is the same, right? Which is that they're chasing market share. They're chasing quarterly returns. They're not focusing on fundamentals. They have good products. They have some really good products, Nissan does. They just need to stop pushing them, and so many automakers do this, right? They have, I have this great product. It needs to sell 200,000 units in the U.S. or it's crap and we're going to throw it away. That's the number that I need to hit my bonus. So we're going to do everything we can to get to that level, and that's it. And if that costs some people some money, from whether it's dealers or the factory workers or whatever, we'll set that aside because I got to hit that quarterly number.
But I also think that, Larry, in addition to all the things you've said, I think Nissan's biggest problem is a perception problem. The customer still thinks of Nissan as a discount brand.
No, I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
Part of the problem is the CVT issue that they had years ago, which apparently has been resolved. The newer CVTs don't have all these issues. But every time I go on Reddit, I'll see these comments on any of the stories, Nissan stories. Well, I'd never buy it because of the CVT. And I think that's Nissan has to figure that problem out more than a product problem. They fixed the CVT issue. Now they have to convince the public that they fixed the CVT issue, and to give them a second chance.
I want to ask you a question, Urvaksh.
Oh, okay.
And I want to hear your conjecture on this. I think Nissan made a fundamental mistake when they launched Infinity, because I think they tried to copy what Toyota had done with Lexus, what Honda tried with Acura, and it just didn't work as well. And I think they blew a lot of money in that, and then trying to launch Infinity, and then to do that, they started cutting elsewhere, and that was really the kernel, to me, of their problems. What do you think?
I agree, and then I've asked top executives, why is Infinity still around? Well, especially now when you're struggling, you have so many priorities and much fewer resources. Why don't you cut your losses and you focus that? They were like, well, it doesn't make any sense because Infinity may not sell in volume, but they're, relatively speaking, the amount that they bring in profit far outweighs any other model that they have. So, like, for example, they like one QX80, would deliver enough profit. I'm just making up a number. I'm not just not anything. Would equal like 100 Sentras that they sell in terms of profit. And for them, their other argument is that they need Infinity in order to get that scale. So all their Infinity vehicles are basically based on Nissan platforms. So Infinity gives them that additional incremental volume that on their Nissan investment, product investment, that will help lower the per unit cost or increase the margin across the lineup. But absolutely, I mean, there is a cost to keep Infinity around. I mean, the marketing of the brand. And everything else, but they see it as a major profit driver.
Oh, I'm sure those units are profitable, but they don't sell in a volume to make it worthwhile to me. But hey, I'm not Christian Munier trying to run a Nissan right now.
You said that Infinity is kind of essentially funding Nissan, I guess, like they're kind of they're bringing in the money.
They're bringing in the money. I wouldn't say funding because the volumes are much
smaller, right? But is there a certain loyalty that consumers have? Is there consumer loyalty to Infinity like you would have with like a Lexus or like a BMW or Acura? No?
Yeah, I'd find that very hard to imagine. I don't think Infinity has the cachet of a Lexus or even an Acura or name recognition. Now, again, back in the day, there was when Infinity was a little edgier in terms of their products with the FX and some of these other models, it did have more of a niche appeal.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on retail strategies, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. We're off tomorrow for the Christmas holiday. Come back on Friday for a look at the year Toyota had in 2025.
Their big announcement this year is their Gorilla, which is RAV4. It outsells, 11 other brands.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.